Hi Renu.
Hi, Karthik. I'm good. How are you?
Good, good as well. Thank you. Thanks a lot for taking time and speaking to me, Renu.
Thank you for inviting me and having this talk with me. I'm very happy to be here, actually.
So, just a quick introduction, right? So, I'm Karthik. I'm one of the founders of Revive, a practice management solution for wellness professionals and healthcare professionals to manage their back office operations and their workflows and their growth, right? This is a growth series podcast that we are doing. The goal of these discussions is to educate the fraternity about each individual's journey, how they got into wellness as a career. What is it that they should expect when they are looking at it as a career option as well, right? Because I think a lot of people have a very rosy picture of what it is to start a private practice, especially in a wellness space, and then their expectations are not met in the first 2 3 years at least, right? So that is when post 2 3 years is when the results start showing where you need or where you have regular sessions and regular work going on, right? So we thought we should do this one to create awareness, put individual story out how they went ahead and built a practice, right? So
Hmm.
that's the goal of this discussion. Would love to know a little bit more about you as well for the viewers as well.
Definitely. So, hi, I'm Renu Seshadri. I am the founder of Guiding Lights Counselling, which is my own private practice, and I'm the lead therapist there. So, by profession, of course, I'm a counseling psychologist. I have a master's in clinical psychology, which I've completed from University of Bath, UK. And I'm a COVID graduate, so I'm an online therapist. Currently, have my whole practice online. So, I've been around 4 years. I think in March I will be completing around 4 years since I've started practicing, and I think 1.5 years since I've started guiding lights counseling. So I think, yeah, that's the kind of introduction that I would like to give. Yeah.
Great, great. Congratulations on finishing 4 years, right? I think
Thank you
that's
so much.
so, yeah. So you mentioned COVID graduate, right? So did
Yes.
you join the course in COVID or prior to COVID, and then you came
So,
out?
yeah. So I started my master's in September 2019, being completely unaware that COVID is going to hit all of us, definitely. So I started my master's in 2019 September and completed it in next year September 2020. So I've done my whole dissertation in the middle of COVID and done it in my uh, dorm room with other people who were stuck with me in UK, and we were just completing our dissertation and motivating each other, being like, okay, we need to get through this course and complete it. So yeah, that's why I kind of like mentioning that I'm a COVID graduate, and I can't believe that it's been like 4 to 5 years almost since that time. So
We tend to skip those couple of years, I think. So 2020 to 2022 is off. And how was the experience, right? So especially after COVID hit, right? I'm sure, one, you had to pursue the masters as well and then finish it.
yes,
Also deal with the other aspects that, COVID pushed us to do, right? Which
yes,
is introspecting internally, looking at our own mental health, right? For you, probably because you were in the industry or you were learning to get into the industry, right? But for everyone else, it was for people who have not looked at mental health the same way. COVID has changed that perspective, right? So, how was it for you and your friends, right? Especially you were
yeah,
out of the country, away from
yes,
comfort zone, right? So,
yeah. Definitely. I think it was a very mixed journey to have, because one, of course, no one was expecting to be, stuck there and be like, we have to complete our course in, let's say, like closed room. We can't go out and necessarily not interact with a lot of people outside. And at the same time, all of us were quite worried about the situation in India. And I think it was a very tough time for everyone in India as well. And, staying away from your family and your friends and loved ones and in a different country and in a different bubble is definitely something that makes it difficult to navigate through. And I think that while I think about back, of it, it's been a difficult journey. At the same time, I think I was grateful for having people around me also who I had made friends with at that time through the course, that we held hands together and be like, okay, let's get through this and get back to our homes, because everyone was like, okay, it's a difficult situation. We definitely didn't know, there was no set path to kind of navigate through all of this. So we
Mm.
were like, okay, let's just hold hands and just get through this time, for example.
So, how did your interest start in psychology, right? So, what did you do prior to the masters?
So, my journey with, I think, my introduction to psychology was in 10th grade. Actually, like while we are in 10th grade, we're also always thinking about what next. And I was quite clear that I didn't want to do science. And I was quite clear that I didn't want to do maths anymore in my life, because I'm not great at it. Okay. And unfortunately, it came back to biting me, because there is stats in psychology. Okay. You can't escape it at all. But I was quite clear that I didn't want to go ahead with commerce as well. And I didn't want to have maths in my life anymore. So I think my option that was left and which interested me was arts. And in 10th grade, I had a friend who, kind of spoke about psychology and spoke about the qualities needed to become a psychologist. And she mentioned things like, you need to be empathetic, you need to be a good listener, you need to, let's say, have a certain kind of quality of kindness. And those were the things that kind of like struck a chord with me, and being like, okay, those things come naturally to me. And mind you, that was my first understanding of being a psychologist. There's a lot that entails in becoming a psychologist, but that was a base that I kind of came across. And those that was a time that I consider myself indecisive in a lot of areas, but this was one thing that kind of, let's say, stuck with me. And I was like, okay, this gives me a clarity that, okay, maybe this is something that I can go ahead and pursue, right? So I
Mm.
understood and came across psychology in 10th grade. Then the next step is to go into arts. Then you come across a lot of subjects in your 11th and 12th grade. There's an introduction to psychology there, and that's when your journey with psychology actually starts, because you get to learn about psychology, the theories, psychology theories, for example. And then you end 12th grade, and then you're like, okay, what do you want to do next? And I think the next step here is to pursue. I pursued a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. So the first 2 years were different kinds of different economics, sociology. Those were the kind of subjects that I was studying. Plus, there was psychology. And then in the third year, I had 6 subjects of psychology,
Mm.
so different fields. So that is the kind of the area where everyone is trying to figure out what their interests are in psychology. There's industrial psychology, there's counseling, there's clinical psychology, there's stats research, and everyone's just trying to figure out which field is my inclination towards. And that was the time when I was kind of like inclining towards clinical or counseling psychology. That was my base, and I was interested in eventually, like going ahead, becoming a psychologist, having my own private practice,
Mm.
building that for myself.
Mm.
So I think that's the kind of journey that has happened.
Mm.
And I think, like, looking back, I was like, okay, this is one thing that I was very clear of when I started my journey.
Mm.
So yeah, that's been my introduction to mental health and psychology.
And once you understood more about what goes into psychology, right? How did that create a difference versus the expectation that you had prior to joining a formal course, right? And did your own personal life experiences did they impact you somewhere in terms of saying, okay, now this is the right path for me, definitely, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when I look back to this, as a child, while I was growing up, I have always been an emotion and a sensitive child. Okay, and I think that now it's much better, but back then I think there was a very less understanding of probably emotions, or let's say the intensity of emotions people differently feel, or let's say, like mental health in particular. There was not much talk about it. There was not much address towards it as well. So while growing up, I think one of the things that I understood is that there was a lot less understanding of emotions. At the same time, I come from a family of engineers. Okay, I'm the odd person out. I was the person who was like, I'm not doing science, I'm not doing commerce, I'm going my separate way. So, one of the biggest challenges I faced was that I was the odd person out. I didn't have any backing in terms of, okay, this is the way that you should go ahead. right? And although of course my parents have been very supportive about it, at the same time they didn't know anything about this field. They have had their doubts that, okay, what are you doing, like what are you going to do moving forward, right? So I think that was one of the ways that was one of the challenges that I was navigating through this field on my own, trying to figure out and trying to understand, okay, how can I make a career out of this? How am I going to, like, make a successful career, scale it to a different level? And that's something that I still feel lacks in the Indian education system also, that there's not much understanding about how do you build a successful practice, right? How
mm,
do you build it to a level that sustains your life
mm,
and helps you pay your bills. There's a lot more importance to how you become a great psychologist, and I understand that's the basis. At the
mm,
same time, there's not much information or that not much understanding about how do you make it into a successful practice for
mm,
yourself.
mm,
So I think that was one of the challenges that I have been, trying to navigate to till date. I would say till date I've been trying to understand, okay, how do we navigate through this field and make this a sustainable lifestyle and a sustainable career for yourself. Yeah.
like you rightly mentioned, right? So when it comes to private practice, then there are a lot of moving things that are there, right? So private practice versus like working with like a mental health clinic or like a institution like an imhans, etc., right? So how is that different, right? So in terms of the kind of work that you do and in terms of the sustenance, the revenue or the scalability and growth, right? So how are those two different? Are there enough avenues for someone to pursue a job as a psychologist?
Yeah. So when you're starting out, you definitely want to, go ahead and let's say take up a job per se or a work at an organization, because from what I've understood, they have a set structure, they have a set system there, and you know that you are going to probably get guidance and let's say help with cases as well. At the same time, from what I've understood from my experience, is that private practice gives you the liberty to, let's say, probably build your practice the way you want. A lot of organizations in India do not probably follow the best ethical practices that are needed for this field, for example, or the pay scale. If you look at the pay scale as well, and I'm not saying that private practice building it to a larger scale is easy, it's
Mm,
definitely difficult. At
mm,
the same time, it does give you liberty to kind of, let's say, assess for yourself that what is my understanding, what is my strengths, and how can I use that to, like, charge my own fee for clients, for example, right? At the same time, when you are working with an organization, there is not necessarily a structure that pays you well yet.
mm,
I've seen very less I'm sure that there are upcoming organizations who are looking into this and be like, okay, while we're catering to our clients, we also need to look after the people who are doing the actual work, which are mental health professionals.
mm, mm,
But when I started out with a space which wasn't necessarily very regulated in terms of the structure. There was not much help in terms of supervision or, let's say, helping with cases. It was just like, okay, take sessions and figure it on your own.
mm,
And imagine just, and this is, I think, the logic of, okay, put this person in the swimming pool and they learn to swim. And unfortunately, I don't think that logic works in psychology, or because essentially, if you would understand, it's you working with a person's life. It's not you just navigating through anything. It is essential for you to be guided, to be helped through it, handheld as well. But I think that that is something, that is a structure that possibly lacks in a lot of organizations. When
mm,
you're in a private practice,
mm,
you firstly feel very, very responsible, plus you feel that you need to be, get all the help that you can, and you reach out for your personal supervision. I twice a month I attend supervision. I have a supervisor who kind of helps me through cases, who helps me understand if I'm lacking somewhere. For example, I have a group of peers that I work with, for example, who where we share ideas, exchange ideas, motivate each other to do better. And that's the kind of accountability I understand comes with, building a private practice also. Because
mm,
of course the responsibility is on you, and
mm,
one of the visions I has been to, build a quality practice, which
mm,
is definitely sustainable for me. At the same time, the end goal remains to have quality given to clients as well. And so that's the kind of understanding I've had with my journey, that probably the organizations are very focused on client centered.
Hmm.
We need to give the best qualities and best work to our clients. I
Hmm.
understand that's personally, as a professional, that's also my goal. At the same time, I don't think we can leave out the point of taking care of your own mental health professionals, right? You can't just pay anything and be like, okay, you still need to show up 100% for your clients. I think that's a bit of an unfair bargain that we are
Yeah.
asking from
Yeah. Yeah.
professions. So with my journey, I've understood that that's a gap that I see necessarily, and which probably has led me to be like, okay, I want my own practice where I can possibly try my best to address these gaps.
Got it.
Yeah,
And you mentioned you started guiding lights 1.5 year ago, right?
yeah,
So,
probably like around that time.
uh,
Yes.
what was the journey before that like, and when did you realize, now I want to start a private practice, and what motivated you to do that?
Yeah. So before that, I worked, like, I'm still part time working with an organization, but on the
Hmm.
side, I'm trying to build and scale up guiding lights
Hmm.
counseling. Like I said, when I started out, I necessarily did not find the right help or probably the right guidance at the start. And I think that really, let's say, probably affected my confidence while I was working
Hmm.
in this field. And after a while, I think I probably thought that opening up my private practice has always been a vision and a dream that I've always had. Like, from the moment I understood that becoming a psychologist is my dream, I think building a practice and having a clinic of my own, having an organization, has been a dream that I've held for myself. So I think after, let's say, having some experience, probably some experience and some guidance with cases, I thought that building a practice that gives me the space to build it in a way that I wanted to, with,
Hmm.
let's say, maintaining the ethics and the quality that I want to see in organizations today. That's what, let's say, led me to push myself to be like, okay, I want my own practice that gives me that space,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And I think like having peers and supervisors around you kind of helps you through that journey,
Hmm.
because I think we all spoke about, somewhere spoke about, okay, having a practice, go have a practice of your own. You will understand the things that you need to do, you will understand the way that you want to manage your work and etc. And that is the kind of support that you need while you're starting something new of your own.
Correct.
So that is kind of like, after I worked with an organization for a year and then I took a break, for example, then I started working with another organization.
Hmm.
And I have had a few gaps where I have felt like, okay, I could be doing so much more with my own space. And after like a while, I was like convinced, okay, I need to take the plunge and go ahead and build this practice for myself. And I wouldn't say it's rosy at all. I wouldn't
Hmm.
advertise that it's rosy, but definitely it does take time. But I think that when I finally did that for myself, I felt like, okay, I'm on the right path, and it will take time to figure it out. But I
Hmm.
think that I'm happy with the pace that I'm taking. Yeah.
So, how did you go about building the practice, right? So, what were some things that you needed to do to set the practice up, and what difficulties did you face in that process, right? Because I'm sure you must have expected something, and the reality might be a little different as well, right? So,
Yeah.
what were
Yeah.
some of those? What were the learnings that you got? How did you navigate that initial part of the journey?
Yeah.
I think that is one of the difficult phases, right? So, especially for me as well, right? So, shifting from a job to building something on
Hmm.
your own.
Yeah.
Initially, there is a lot of friction within yourself, right? So, where you are questioning the move, where you are thinking, should I not have done this? Was there
Yeah.
something else I could have done to do this, right? So, how did you navigate that phase?
Yeah, definitely. From what you mentioned, I do remember having this tug of war within me as well, that, building your own organization requires you to be very structured and requires you to be very clear with what you want to do next and figuring things out on your own. Especially when you're starting out, you may not necessarily have a team of people with you, right? So that's one of the things that I noticed while I was also transitioning, and that was one of the things that definitely came up for me. One initial thing that I think I did with starting my practice. One is, of course, deciding on the name. I would definitely mention that it was one of those ideas that came up during my group supervision. We were just talking about, building practices, and if you had to think of a name for your practice, what would it be? And it just, one of my favorite songs from Coldplay is Fix You. And
Hmm.
there is a line in Fix You which is guide
Lights
lights
will
will
guide
guide
you.
you home. So I think, like, that line just gives me a vision of, like multiple lights and that leading you to a brighter space. And I see it like brighter space in your life, and that's where the idea of guiding lights counseling actually came from. That was one of the things that was out of the way for me, that I have a name, what next? So I definitely needed to fix my payment structure. I needed to have, let's say, probably a website that had all my information, and I needed to definitely figure out that how would people reach out to me if
Hmm.
they did need a session with me. What would be the process? Do I want to provide consultation calls? And I feel that that's very essential for clients to reach out and be like, okay, who am I going to be working with?
Hmm.
Consultation calls are very, very important. I provide free consultation calls on guiding lights counseling. So that's one of the few things that I decided while I was planning this transition, for example. And I wouldn't say that it was a very quick transition. It did take time for me to kind of navigate through the self doubt as well. One of the challenges that I personally faced was a lot of self doubt in terms of, am I capable enough to transition on my own into this journey? And I think till date it is one of my biggest issues that I face, is that there are bouts of self-doubt that comes in with the kind of work that you're doing right now in the mental health space. um, it's heavy work, it's intense work, it needs you to be on your toes, and it needs you to be somewhere organized with the way that you're working.
Hmm.
And that can, let's say, bring in some kind of self-doubt for you, is like, hey, if you transition, do you think you will be, ready to navigate through all of this
Hmm.
by yourself?
Hmm.
Because, like I said, a private practice is a sole responsibility until you have a team of people under you or
Hmm.
with you, working with
Hmm.
you,
Hmm.
right? Of course, I have had the support of my co-founder, who's, let's say, been there, helped me build the website, helped me navigate through these bouts of self-doubt as well,
Hmm.
being like, okay, just go for it, we'll figure it out. So having that support was very, very important for me, and in those times, and I think that has kind of helped me navigate through the challenges that I've also seen. Yeah.
So, how do you try to create a difference or a differentiator for guiding lights, right? So, because with the time progressing, there are a lot more people taking up mental health or well-being as a profession or a career choice, right? And soon there will be a lot more clutter, right? I think the demand is also getting built up towards it in a country like India with the volumes that we have and the problems that we have. Everyone has some sort of a mental health issue that they are trying to deal with, knowingly or unknowingly, right? So, how do you plan to create a differentiation, right? So, are there any focus areas that you want to focus on and say these are the problems that, as guiding lights, we want to solve for?
So, of course, when I'm starting out, I have a range of issues that I work with my clients right now. Those are my focus areas, and I tend to, let's say, work on being trauma informed and updated with the way that I'm working as a practitioner, as an individual. Definitely, that's my goal with guiding lights counseling, is that one, there is quality, and then there is second, is that needs to be accessible, and it needs to definitely be up to date with the way that the world is functioning right now,
Hmm.
right? Those are the three things that currently is my focus in, and I usually work with my clients in fields of, in areas of anxiety, depression, self-esteem, relationship issues. Those are the major areas that I work with my clients. And the maintaining quality also requires you to, let's say, focus on building your skills further. And that's what I take very, very seriously for myself as well, is that I you would find me in supervision. You would find me updating myself through training programs, or, let's say, learning and keeping myself up to date with the new techniques, or possibly deeper techniques that are used in this field. And thirdly, very, very important for me is to be trauma informed with all my practice, and that's a journey. I wouldn't say that it comes very easily. It is a journey. It comes with experience, that you are working on being trauma informed and taking a trauma informed lens towards your work. The other aspect of wanting to do things differently with guiding lights counseling is that my co-founder and I are working on a medical emergency app which is called June, and it's in the builds right now, and it is going to, let's say, possibly a medical and emerging emergency app that helps you with your needs during a medical emergency, finding hospitals, finding ambulance, then getting first aid in those moments, right? So our longer goal with guiding lights counseling is collaborating with June and creating a crisis counseling section for that.
Mm,
So
mm,
as you would understand, medical emergencies come in with a lot of stress. It not only is for the person who's going through the medical emergency, it's also for the family members who are going through it. And that's an area that we have understood is probably not very given much importance currently. And in the longer run, our focus tends to be collaborating with June and having a crisis counseling section and working in that area and navigating through this space. Other than that, I think we are working on bringing in support groups and workshops for corporates. Those are the kind of things that are in the build right now. I think in the near future, in the next few months, I think we'll, as in Guiding Lights Counseling, we'll start working on that.
nice,
Yeah.
nice. A lot of exciting stuff then.
Yeah.
How does your day as a therapist or a mental health professional look like, right? So, what all goes into it? Do you get time to balance work and life, especially when it comes to mental health, right? So, because you are creating safe spaces for people to open up, I'm sure that impacts you as well. Because as someone with high empathy, right, I think you are always trying to put yourself in someone's shoes, right? How does that impact you, and how does the day look like? How do you ground yourself? How do you manage all this?
So, from what I've understood, and something that I would want people who are trying to enter the field is that when you start working as a psychologist in this early years, you're like, okay, I need to take as many sessions as I can, and fill my day with work and everything. Um, when I did that, probably, and it was just an, I think, unsaid expectation from people as well that you need to keep yourself busy and you need to take as many sessions. I think that's where a lot of us go wrong because as a psychologist, as a therapist, your limits are going to be very different from, let's say, other people. So
Mm,
some psychologists are able to take like 5 to 6 sessions a day and they are able to, let's say, navigate through it well. For me, from what I understood is that probably 3 to 4 sessions are my limit. I start probably by 12 or 1 in the day and I end my day probably in most days by 8, 8:30, right? So that's the kind of time period that I work mostly with, like with sessions and with probably notes, keeping up with notes or taking breaks between sessions. That's the kind of structure that I follow. Before 12, there's my routine starts with, and I've tried my best to include this, is that start my day with yoga, then let's say possibly prepare myself for the day, have breakfast, and then start my before I start my sessions, there's some time between me going into sessions and my breakfast is that time that I just catch up with the work that I am intending to do for the day. There are other things as well that I want to look into, more probably be updated with what I have to do for the day in terms of any particular cases. And that's the kind of routine that I've, let's say, tried to establish after a long time. I wouldn't say it was very easy in the start. It was difficult to, let's say, kind of get a grasp of what kind of work you're doing in this
mm,
field. Right at the start, it felt like, okay, just go ahead with it and start doing it. But with time, you do understand that consciously, unconsciously, it does take a toll on you as a person.
mm,
And you definitely need to create those practices in between that help you take care of yourself better,
mm,
right? And there's a very basic understanding in the field as well, is that you can only help your clients when you are also taking care of yourself as a practitioner,
right.
right? For our work is such is that if you're not okay, necessarily unknowingly as well, it can show up in your work. So it is you who has to take the responsibility of taking care of yourself first and then delving into the kind of work that you're doing.
Mm,
So some things that have definitely worked for me is, one, knowing my limits, definitely. How many sessions can I take? There are times that I may not be able to take 3 sessions. Those are the times that I recognize that I need to slow down,
mm,
probably have more breaks, probably, let's say, slow down in terms of have breaks in between, have holidays in between, probably delve into something else, engage myself somewhere else, and then come back to my work.
Hmm.
Probably create that distinction. Secondly, I think just having a routine where you know that there are going to be times where you will have a separation from your work, like a morning routine, probably a nighttime routine, just separating yourself from the work. That's very important. Thirdly, I am very lucky to have friends and family around me who know the kind of work that I do, and they understand and they make sure that I'm hanging out with them, I'm talking to them, they are making space for me as well, and I'm making space for them. So that's a space that I cherish very heavily, because that's something that I think all of us need, is support. Even if you understand emotions differently, even if you have the kind of work that you're doing,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, your psychologist is a person who experiences everything in a similar way as you do. So having that external support, having people around you, that seems to be a very, very important factor for me as well. Yeah.
So during the day, right? So how much time goes into the actual core work, right? Which is working with your clients or upskilling or reading their case notes, right?
Yeah.
Which is all the core work, right? Versus how much time goes in actually managing the practice, right? So where you're doing the documentation of stuff, where you're organizing, where you're sending out communications, right? So how much time goes into that, and what systems or what processes do you have in place to do this more effectively, right? So that operations doesn't consume a lot of your time.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I have understood is that before I start my core work, I definitely need, let's say, at least just probably 1 hour or half an hour to check in with what's been happening. So, for example, I need to just check in with if I have any forms that have been filled. So, on my website, there's a form that you can fill for the sessions, or if you want a consultation call with me, that is a form that you need to fill in. So, my work includes, let's say, checking emails in terms of getting updates whether there are any forms that have been filled. And after that, there's a set process that I have with regards to, after someone fills in the form, I need to send them an email with all the information that I wanted the client to know. That's the kind of process that I follow, which takes, let's say, probably half an hour to 40 minutes for me to just be up to date with what's happening.
Hmm.
At the same time, like scheduling, I think I do all of my scheduling for the next week on a Friday.
Hmm.
So I kind of like, just let's say all my clients know that on Friday they will see slots open for the next week. That's something that's a system for me, because I take Friday when everything for the week, probably everything is done. I sit down and be like, okay, what's the slot that I can open up for the next week? What are the time slots that I will be free, available, and who are the clients that need to be, updated about the next week slot, for example. So those are certain things that I think on an everyday basis, at least 30 minutes. But on Fridays or Saturdays, it's a recap of what's left, what needs to be documented, who needs to be contacted. For example, probably who is there anything? For example, a lot of people may ask for psychiatrist referrals, or maybe someone wants a different referral of a psychologist, for example. And I take these very seriously, because I definitely don't want people to, let's say, be misguided here. So I
Hmm.
need to make sure that I'm giving referrals that I personally understand the kind of work the person is doing, and then it reaches to the client for them to reach out further.
Hmm.
So those are a few things that I think like happen on a week to week basis with regards to the practice that you're building.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Got it. And so when you started the practice versus post starting or now, right? What was your expectation of the skills that were required to establish and run the practice, right? Because especially since you have taken a different path, right? You have not gone through
Yeah.
like engineering or some other corporate career and then transition, right?
Yes.
So what were some of the skills that you had to pick up, right? How's the demand for that, right? Even now, right? So what are some skills that you need to keep on constantly learning, because the landscape is evolving, right? So the delivery mechanism for even the marketing or the the services that you are providing has become
Yeah.
mainly digital.
Yes.
It becomes essential to understand that ecosystem so that you are able to navigate that, right? So what was that? Was it shock? How did you navigate that in terms of building new skill sets that are not actually warranted for a psychologist, but you have to do it because of the landscape that we are in?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think like a lot of us in the field are like probably understanding that, like I said, in the education system, there's a lot more focus on the skills that you develop as a psychologist with the practice that you have with your clients, but probably there's not much information, there's not much understanding of what other things you really need to do to, let's say, what other skills you really need to build on to, let's say, market your practice, right? Get a consistent client flow for yourself, for example. Or if you do have a social media presence, for example, how do you maintain boundaries with that presence that you have? Because it's very very essential to, let's say, it's a very thin line between showing up on social media and maintaining that line with your clients, because they know you in sessions and they may, let's say, see a different side of you on social media, and that can be a tricky space to navigate through. So I
Hmm.
think one, marketing skills, I think there's very less understanding of how would you market your practice, how do you connect with people who may be your potential clients, for example, how do you, let's say, present yourself to people and still maintain that boundary, for example. Secondly, I think social media game. I'm sometimes quite jealous of the Gen Z because they have a very strong hold on social media and they have a strong hold on Instagram, and they know that the reels and the kind of content that they can put out to, let's say, reach out to the right audience.
Hmm.
I struggle with that aspect. I think that that is something that, let's say, I know it's an upcoming space, but at the same time, I think maybe there was not much importance given to it previously. But with COVID, what has happened is a lot of your practice is online,
Hmm.
right? You are much more accessible to people. So I am much more accessible to people outside. So you am much more accessible to maybe international students who are in different countries, people outside the country, or probably in anywhere in India,
Hmm.
probably. And my work, other than, let's say, showing up as a psychologist, also tends to be how do I reach to my right clients,
Hmm.
right? I don't know if I'm reaching out to the right people. I need to, let's say, maintain a social media presence. I also need to, let's say, probably work through strategies that can help me reach out to the right people and let them know how my practice works.
Hmm.
So I think marketing and social media is something that I have, let's say, possibly. I knew it was going to be a struggle, but I didn't know it was going to be such a big struggle. And I was like, okay, with time, I've understood, okay, this is something that I'm struggling and I need to, definitely figure out how I'm going to navigate through this space. Yeah.
So how did you go about that? So have you did you like do some kind of courses or read about it?
Yeah, of course, I've read about it. I've not done a course yet, and I would not lie. I'm still figuring out how much comfort I have in this and how I
Hmm.
would want to show up. For example, with time, I've understood Instagram is a difficult space to crack.
Hmm.
Right? It is a difficult space to reach the right people there, and
Hmm.
I've understood probably LinkedIn is the space that, let's say, is a mid range for me to be comfortable to put out my content
Hmm.
and also like maintain that boundary and also probably reach the kind of clients that I'm looking for,
Hmm.
right? So that's an understanding that I've have had after probably failing on Instagram. Okay, and like I've given it a try. I was like, okay, probably I should go ahead and try and see what works here, not works here, and then realizing, okay, it's taking way more energy than doing my work as a psychologist. Like the work that I do with my clients, it's taking way more than
Yeah.
I need. And then I was like, okay, probably I should try another platform and see if that works better for me. So
Hmm.
that's in works for me to, kind of be more confident and put myself out there and, talk about what the kind of work that I do and reach out to the clients more and more.
Hmm.
Right. So that's been my experience, and I wouldn't at all lie that I've cracked the code and I'm like great at it. I'm just still figuring it out, and there's a long way to go ahead and get comfortable in this space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with technology improving, right? So I think we are in an age where processing power is increasing by the day, by the week, right? So we have seen probably we are one of those generations. We have I don't know if you're from the same generation I'm talking about, but we've seen floppy to like
Yeah.
maybe SanDisk, right? So
Yes.
with AI advancing on a daily basis, right? So how do you see that impacting a space like mental health, right? A lot of people seem to be trying to build AI therapists, right? How do you see a technology like AI impacting space like a mental health, right?
Yeah. So, from what I've like understood and seen around, is that unfortunately there seems to be an idea that therapists can be replaced with AI, which I would like to stand my ground that I probably think it may not work out the best way possible. I feel that at the core of mental health is, let's say, human connection and community building. And I'm saying this from a perspective of working with clients who crave human connection, who crave having support and community. So I feel that, let's say, probably AI may not be able to entirely replace that aspect for you. At the same time, I understand that AI has been helpful for people to, let's say, probably understand their emotions better, seek help
Mm,
from that aspect. So I've seen that it can be a tool that can probably help us enhance our work as therapists. It can help us enhance the way that we work. Probably it can help us a lot in our systems that we do on the back of our work with regards to, let's say, schedulings and, let's say, maintaining notes. Probably those are the kind of things that I'm hoping that AI can be make it probably easier. But at the same time, I don't think it can, let's say, probably be spoken about as okay, it is going to replace us or replace the kind of work AI, therapists do in the near future. I feel that it can be used as a tool and it can very well work along. And I'm not saying that I'm like completely against it. I think that we are in a space right now where we need to let's say be up to speed with the kind of advancements that are happening.
mm,
Right? My only thing is that are we doing it ethically?
mm,
Are we doing it in a regulated way?
mm,
Are we probably, let's say, being aware of what the consequences, what the negative consequences can be of, let's say, probably pushing it completely on this
mm,
era currently? That's
mm,
my only concern with it. I don't think anyone has an issue with, let's say, working side by side with it. I think it can
mm,
help us enhance our practices. It can definitely and help other people as well as clients who want to use it as a tool to, let's say, maybe process different emotions. I know people who speak to chat gpt as a friend.
okay.
Okay, I am aware. So I know that people are using it as, a reflective practice. I know chat gpt is helping you reflect on certain things, and that's great, and I think it's a tool that everyone's using it as. I just hope people don't think that it can replace a human connection or let's say a community in that sense.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, right? So I don't think AI at this point has the capability to have the same kind of life experiences as a human being, right? Because I think that
Yeah,
is what makes us different as well, right? Even as people, right? So my life experiences might be completely different than yours, right? I don't think AI can be trained at that level to be able to empathize and hold space for someone, right? But like you said, it can definitely be used to help people and augment as other resources, right? So while professionals like yourself can focus on their own capability, while AI can take care of the rest of the things, right? So I think that is the vision that I feel is more realistic and more productive for the larger ecosystem as well.
yeah,
In terms of the clientele, right? So, do you work with a specific age group or a specific, or do you have clients who are varying, right? And if they are varying, then how do you update yourself about them, right? So now if you have a Gen Z coming to you, then you need to understand what their society is like, what are their thoughts and everything, versus a boomer or someone who is slightly elder coming to you. You have to understand their thought process, right? So
yeah,
how do you bridge that gap and able to switch it on and off based on the client that you're working?
yeah. So when you say Gen Z, I am on the Gen Z spectrum, but I'm at like a very border
Yeah.
starting point of Gen Z. So of course, I would say that there's a psychology as a field and mental health as a field is ever growing, and it keeps like changing and advancing every other day, and definitely it keeps you on your toes consistently. So to answer your question, my age group that I work with is 18 to, let's say, possibly 50, and you would see that it's a very huge
Large
range,
spectrum. Yeah.
that I have. At the same time, I think that most of my clientele, if I like look back right now, is between like probably 20 to 35. Most of my clients, I feel that are on that range, and there are, let's say, possibly a few of the common issues that everyone is probably navigating through. There are relationship issues, there is career issues that are going through, probably like issues with family, navigating through probably toxic relationships. That is the kind of areas that I am, let's say, possibly seeing right now. And with regards to the kind of approach that you decide with the client, I am very clear with the understanding that you can have, as a therapist, have a basis approach that is very personal for you, that this is the kind of approach that I take with my clients. At the same time, there is another part to it, is that you tailor your approach according to the kind of client that you're working with. There are certain tools that you use differently. Pick certain different tools for different clients while you're working with them. And I would say that that comes with, let's say, kind of working with time, that you get that understanding that how do you, let's say, possibly pick different tools for different clients and do justice to it
Mm.
in the therapy space.
Mm.
And I would say that even after having a lot of experience, there is a lot of learning curve in mental health space as a
Yeah.
therapist. So for me personally, my basis is in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is more on talk therapy, which is a basis in talk therapy, which is, let's say, challenging negative thoughts, probably reframing thoughts, which is what I started with. My major work started with that practice. Then eventually I understood that only talk therapy or probably CBT may not be the best fit for a lot of people. And that's when I started, let's say, probably building my approach into a trauma informed lens. I did certifications. I've of course been doing readings on it. That's one thing. The third part to this is merging my CBT with, let's say, somatic therapies as well. So
Mm.
I have a certification in EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. It's one of the techniques that, one of the tools that is commonly known as tapping. So it's probably building a connection between your mind and body and helping you, let's say, navigate through the stressors or, let's say, experiences that you have. So
Mm.
if you would see, my journey definitely started with what I knew the best and I learned the best in my masters, through, let's say, probably with time and with the experiences that I've had, cultivated into, okay, I need to push my boundaries and probably get trauma informed, add more skills to my skill set, and then decide what client needs what, right?
Mm.
So that's been kind of a journey, and I think it's never stopping. I think it's going to go, and let's say there's going to be a lot more advancements and an
Yeah.
understanding in this field that keeps happening, and you need to kind of be on your toes and be like, okay, what next? Do I want to kind of master, learn for the better service that I can do as a therapist for my clients?
No, you are absolutely right. Right. So I think as a race, I think we have figured out a lot of physical health, right? But we
Hmm.
have not figured out our mental health or how our minds or brains work, right?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that research will, I'm sure, keep going on. And
Keep going. Yeah, yeah,
have you also experienced clients who are, very resistant to therapy, right? Where probably their expectation of what therapy is and what the outcome could be, right, is completely different, right, than what the reality is. I'm sure, when I tried therapy for the first time, I expected a breakthrough in my first session, right? So, and then I was like, okay, no, ye to nahi
yeah,
hota, right? So, there
yeah,
is enough work that I, as a client, have to do, and should be open for new experiences and be able to freely share and talk about things, right?
yeah.
Have you experienced clients who are resistant, and how do you build that trust and a safe space for them to open up for you?
Yeah, yeah. Firstly, like I mean, I refrain from calling any clients as resistant. It's just that probably there's not much, either it's not much information that they have understood about therapy, or they
Mm.
have never given it a try. They have a different understanding completely, and I think that that doesn't match with the kind of expectation that they come in the first few sessions, and they feel, okay, this is not working for me, or this is not a space that feels the best for me. And so I probably don't call any client as resistant, but I genuinely feel that one, therapy is a difficult process to get into. It is not a flowery space, and it is a very human thing to expect things to, like, work out and be like, okay, this space is going to be a magical space and it's going to solve all my problems, and in one session, or a few sessions. Thirdly, it is very difficult to, let's say, find a therapist that is right for you, right? Of course, all of us collectively in the field are trying to, like, not make it a difficult space to find the right therapist. At the same time, I feel it's like anything, like a dating thing. You are looking for someone that, let's say, is the best fit for you, probably makes you feel comfortable, and is providing you that space, right? It does take time to, let's say, get a right therapist for yourself. From what I've understood, I show up as myself in sessions. I my strongest qualities that I consider is empathetic listening and creating a authentic space for my clients to show up as themselves,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
um, it is okay if it takes time for you to get comfortable with this process. It
Mm.
is okay if you are testing this process, right? If there is frustration, if there is hesitation, if there is any kind of resistance that you hold to this process, all of that is welcome in this space.
Mm.
That's the part of this process. And I think one of the moments, or the processes that is important for this, is my rapport with my clients.
Mm.
And it's a very, very important point. It does take time to build that rapport with clients, and I feel I'm patient with my clients to probably come to a space that, okay, now I feel comfortable to open up and talk
Mm.
about certain things.
Mm.
Therapy is a collaborative process. While you're coming to a psychologist or a therapist for help, it is a space that you are creating for yourself as a
Mm.
person, right? So even if you take time, even if you are, let's say, feeling any kind of hesitation towards it, it is completely okay, right? We are here to create that space, to make it feel like it is a probably a safe space for you. It's building a safe space for you to probably feel okay to open up and feel like you can, let's say, talk through things or work through things, right? So it does take time, and it is completely okay,
How do
right?
you think the level of awareness is there in a country like India, right? Versus globally, and where is it going, right? I think the younger generations like Gen Z, right? So I think they are more aware about their priorities as a person, their mental well-being, their holistic well-being, right? That shift is happening. Where do you see the country going, right?
Hmm.
Is that awareness going to get built up and turn into something more productive, where people will explore options to manage their mental health or holistic well-being, right? Where do you see that going?
So I think COVID was, how much of a horrible it was. It was also a catalyst for a lot of more people to, let's say, possibly reach out for therapy and start working on their mental health and understanding how, like, as a society, things have affected us. And I think after COVID, I see that there has been a lot more awareness and probably a lot less stigma around it. I know that there's still a section of society that probably thinks that, okay, therapy, I don't believe in it, and mental health, what is mental health? It's nothing. That section is probably going to always exist, and we don't mind that, but there's a lot more awareness regarding mental health, and probably reaching out to a professional and getting help. I think that idea has kind of, let's say, probably gotten more comfortable with among people.
Hmm.
At the same time, I think with that shift, probably there is a phase of it getting very overgeneralized as well.
Hmm.
I feel that people may be using words and disorders or illnesses in a very generalized way, and probably personalizing it to themselves.
Hmm.
So while we we as therapists love that people are getting aware. I think there also needs to be a certain kind of structure in the way that people are perceiving and understanding the kind of information that is out there about mental health, about therapy, about navigating through mental illnesses or disorders, or as a society, how we want to navigate through it. Because what happens is anything at an extreme, I think it always backfires.
Yeah.
Probably as a society, anything in an extreme is definitely going to end up in a disaster.
Hmm.
That's what I understand, is that while there's a lot of awareness, there's probably a lot of overgeneralization that is happening with regards to trauma, for example, toxicity in relationships, probably like there's a very buzzword, and narcissistic personality. Those are the kind of like, those are very intricate, very specific traits and situations that we are talking about. And I think that with time, what has happened is it's gotten very overgeneralized, and probably that scares me a bit.
Hmm.
Like scares me a bit that people may be overgeneralizing and personalizing it too much
Hmm.
without, let's say, probably knowing the right kind of information or
Hmm.
having that distinction there.
Hmm.
So while I understand that globally as well, I think like initially from what I understood is that there is a more open approach to, let's say, maybe going for therapy
Hmm.
and considering mental health as something that's important. At the same time, I think India is not behind. It's
Hmm.
catching up. And there's a lot more cultural factors that come into play when you are talking about mental health and therapy in India,
Right.
right? So while I was in UK, I thought that okay, if I'm like if I'm going to work there, of
Hmm.
course I need to look at the cultural aspects there as compared to if I'm working in India. So when I'm back in India, I'm working with a clientele in India. I need to be very, very culturally sensitive
Hmm.
and need to build my practice around that aspect. So I think those are the few factors that I have understood come into play, and it's important globally, or as a country in India, which is very diverse, very huge. There's so many cultural differences and cultural norms that come in, that you do take care as a therapist when you're working with a client.
Correct. Correct.
That's okay.
What would be your advice or suggestion for people who are looking at pursuing wellness as a career, especially mental health as a career, right? What are some things that they should know prior to taking that step, or prior to starting a practice, or getting into the real world and pursuing their career, right? What are some things that you wish someone had told you?
Firstly, one is from my personal experience, is that one, assess with yourself and know about this field that it is very heavy work
Hmm.
and it is intense work, and you will be responsible, or you will, let's say, be working with other people's emotions, right? And like I said, I got the first understanding that being empathetic, or let's say patient or kind or non-judgmental, those are the base qualities that you need. Definitely, I understand that's something that you definitely need to assess with yourself. At the same time, those are not the only qualities that you need as a therapist to flourish in this space. There's a lot of understanding, there's a lot of like more world view that you need to, let's say, open up to let's say work in this field. And it's a constant work that you also need to do on yourself to be competent in this field, right? So have an idea about this before you enter this space. And I'm not saying that no other career needs you to, let's say, constantly upgrade yourself. Definitely needs. At the same time, this needs you to be more mindful, because you're working with people's lives and you may be doing it with, let's say, a lot of vulnerable spaces and vulnerable communities and everything. So that's something that you may want to look out before you step into this field.
Hmm.
Second, unfortunately, the pay scale is not great.
Hmm.
You need to assess that for yourself, that if you're okay with, let's say, I don't think any of us are okay with the pay scale, but I know that we are trying to, let's say, make the best out of it and trying to make it better for the community as well. At the same time, have a realistic view that when you enter this field, unfortunately, because the mental health sector is not very regulated in India, the pay scale and the kind of wages that you may receive, the kind of roles that you may receive in the start may not be what you're expecting them to be.
Mm.
So be very mindful, be very like up to date with the kind of roles that you're approaching, with the kind of work that you want to do. Be try to be clearer with that. Thirdly, a person who's entering into a practice, I do want us to, let's say, probably be aware that there are certain base qualifications that we definitely need to keep in mind. You need to have a master's before you start your practice. Please don't get into the practice thinking that I don't need a master's. I don't need, even after a master's, I would say a lot of people don't feel equipped to, start working with clients. That's a gap that I genuinely see in India. That is that after a master's also you may not entirely feel equipped to start taking clients. So make sure that the base is there of having a master's. Try to complete your qualifications and then get into this space, and then, like, of course, you keep upskilling, and upgrade yourself with the kind of work that you're doing. So yeah, that's something that I would want people to be aware of. Have a realistic view of the field before you get in. And the last point is, apart from having a practice, or let's say being a psychologist, there's a lot that is happening in psychology right now, right? So don't narrow yourself. I think that you can explore other aspects of psychology. There's a lot that is happening in psychology is everywhere at this point,
Mm.
and you can create your own space, create a role for yourself, and make yourself useful in this field. We need more people to, kind of use it differently. We do need people to, let's say, kind of show up as their best selves in the psychology field, and, explore other aspects as well. So
Mm.
I think, take your time, see through the field, and then, come in and make the best that you can do here.
That's good, I think. And interestingly, you mentioned, about the regulatory space in the country as well, right? So,
Yeah.
this is something that we have also been, checking, right? So, one of the features that a lot of people have requested us was a feature for note taking, right?
Yeah.
Something that automates, because currently I think everything happens on pen and paper and then that gets digitized. But then outside India, there are compliances like HIPAA, etc., where
Hmm.
there are regulations, there are compliance practices that
Yeah.
you can put in place to ensure that this is secure, right? In India,
Hmm.
that is not the case, right?
Yeah.
So, in the coming years, from your perspective or from mental health perspective, right? So, what are some things that the authorities or the system can help make the ecosystem better for everyone that is involved, right? All the stakeholders. What do you think
Yeah.
can be done?
Yeah. Specifically for note taking or in general?
In general, for larger ecosystem, the
Yeah.
regulatory space or the compliance
Yeah.
space, right? So,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
some sort of best practices, like you mentioned, the pay scales, right? So, can there be some sort of wage normalization for
Yeah.
wellness
Yeah.
professionals, right? So, what
Yeah.
are some things
Definitely.
that the government can help with?
Yeah, I think, like, even though I feel that there are still bodies that are, let's say, organizations or bodies that are working towards regulating the space, I think it's not being done in the best way possible. I think we all, as professionals, I know that there is a licensing for clinical psychologists, but not yet very, like, prominently for counseling psychologists. And the number of people who are practicing as counseling psychologists is a huge number. I think that's one that a lot of us feel there is a lack of understanding there, a lack of system there. Secondly, I think with the wage scale, like I mentioned, the pay scale, there's no regulation around like how much you can, like charge a person. For example, how much you can pay for a person as an employee when they're working with you. I think it's also like an association with mental health or mental health professionals, that you're doing a noble cause. You shouldn't be, like, charging for your service. And I think a lot of us believe that we wouldn't charge if we knew that we were getting paid from somewhere, and we knew that we wouldn't want to charge from the clients, but possibly get it from somewhere as a probably a government body that is, let's say, actually working on regulating this space for us.
Hmm.
And thirdly, regards to note taking, it is the bane of my existence. I would like to tell you that's one part of my work which I think I'm still trying to be like, I need to be, like, okay with this. I need to work through this. But it's been a very difficult space for me personally, and I think there may be professionals outside that, kind of know that it is a space that is difficult to navigate through, because I don't think there's a set structure to it yet. Possibly, I think everyone uses a different structure, I understand. At the same time, I think probably we haven't necessarily figured out a set structure for it. Like you said, outside there are bodies who regulate, who have compliance with regards to saving this, and like maintaining the legalities with regards to it. I think probably somewhere here, I don't think we have cracked that yet, right? So that's a structure that I feel like we need to figure out as a community as well, to, let's say, kind of understand how note taking can be probably structured, and let's say the maintaining of privacy, and because it contains a lot of information that is very confidential, and
Correct.
it has to be protected at the best way possible. So that's something that I understand that has not been probably looked into very strongly yet. Yeah.
So, what is your view on holistic well-being, right? So, do you collaborate with any other professionals from different modalities like yoga, physical health, or like any other alternative healing modalities? Because I'm sure mental health aspect is something that you are helping someone with, right? Maybe you realize they need some sort of physical activity or some other modality to be involved. So, do you collaborate with other professionals, and how does that work, right? So, do you guys?
Yeah, yeah. Currently, I don't think I have like that kind of a structure set in where I do collaborate with other professions, but I definitely feel that that is a necessity, and I aim to, let's say, probably have that kind of a structure in the near future, because I feel like you mentioned, a holistic well-being would mean that while you're taking care of your mental health in the therapy space, outside the therapy space there are a lot of areas that you need to look into: your physical health, probably your the nutrition that you are taking in, for example, and the kind of, let's say, probably the balance that you're creating in your life. So the kind of collaboration that I right now do with is psychiatrists. If any clients need medications, that's the kind of collaboration I do. But I think that there is definitely a need to, let's say, approach it holistically. So having a certain kind of structure where you know that you can direct your clients to probably professionals who are doing, let's say, probably yoga, meditation. There are certain kind of nutritionists on the panel that can help clients with regulating that. That can be an amazing space to help clients to the best way possible. So I think that that seems like a great structure to have in the near future. Yeah.
So, throughout your journey, right? So, in the last 4 years, 5 years, right? So what has been or what have been some of the most rewarding things that have happened in your practice that motivate you to keep going, right? Because working in a niche space that doesn't have too much awareness in a country like India, you need a lot of motivation to keep going. So what keeps you going?
Firstly, I think my clients keep me going because I understand that there's not much understanding of mental health, but the kind of shift that I have seen in people who reach out for help. Firstly, it's very difficult to reach out for help when you are struggling, and to be consistent with it. To be, let's say, show up for yourself consistently. I think I learn a lot from my clients. And secondly, some days I feel so grateful to have that space with my clients where they do show that trust to share their vulnerable parts with me, right? And uh, I think on days when, like on days when I've not felt the best, I think it is also because I think that I'm feeling like I'm lacking with the work that I'm doing with my clients. At the same time, wherever I've felt the most motivated, also would be one of those days when I feel like my work with my clients has shown a different impact in their lives, or the kind of, space that we are able to create with them is probably, let's say, some days one of the biggest motivators I have to keep showing up in this field. And like I sometimes go back and think, okay, we started from somewhere and we are at one point, and I feel like it's been a journey to getting more and more confident with the work that I do. And it's because clients have also like shown up for themselves, and it just comes across through screens, being like, okay, if they can do it, you also need to show up as your best self. So that's the kind of motivation that I feel I have gotten in this field, while there are a lot of factors that don't work in your favor on some days. Yeah.
And what is in store for Guiding Lights in 2025? What are the goals for you guys?
2025, I think we're hoping to crack the social media and marketing strategies here firstly. Second, I think there's support groups and workshops probably in the pipeline, and I probably want to, let's say, expand to corporates and colleges and probably bring in workshops that are useful for these areas. And definitely in the longer run, with June, we are, let's say, hoping to, bring in the crisis counseling center or section that is helpful for the caregivers and people who are going through medical emergencies or medical issues, for example. I think that that's an area that probably has not been paid attention to much. And I think we want to, let's say, understand how important that is. I think we all probably got an idea during COVID how it can affect you to, different levels. And I think that's one of our aims to, kind of establish that and take it forward with the kind of quality work that we want to provide. That's one of the aims that we're hoping to establish in the near future. Yeah.
All the best with everything. Great
Thank you
initiatives, I
so
think.
much.
Right?
Thank
I think
you.
before we close out, right? So a lot of people like the entrepreneur fraternity as well, right? So that I constantly interact with. So everyone faces some sort of anxiety, stress because they are, building things unconventionally. Is there any quick exercise or quick tip that you would like to give for people to practice when they are feeling overwhelmed? Probably, right? So
Yeah.
is there something that
Yeah.
helps them calm down or ground themselves in a quick way?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so definitely one of the my favorite exercises to also like work with in my clients is a 5 4 3 2 1 grounding technique, and that's like probably coming to the like top of my mind right now. Is like we could just go ahead with
Yes.
it. Is that at this point, if you were to notice 5 things around you that are probably red, what do you notice around you?
There is like a small elephant statue or like a toy in my room. There's there's some memorabilia that is in red color.
There's a painting right behind you.
Yeah. So there are two, three other things. There's a wire here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Four different sounds that you're able to hear around you.
The fan, the construction outside. Can't spot another two sounds.
Your own voice.
Yeah, my own voice. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
recording here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Three different textures that possibly you're able to touch around you. So anything, any soft surfaces, any rough surfaces, anything like that.
Yeah. So the chair has different textures, right? So it has one is a soft texture, one has like some kind of lines on it, and the cushion is of leather.
So yeah. Okay. Two different smells that you recognize around you, and if you had to describe them, how would you kind of describe the smell?
I think the coffee that I have, right?
Hmm.
The other one is the room freshener that is there outside.
Does it have a particular smell?
I think yeah, room freshener has like a citrusy smell, right? And the coffee
Hmm.
has those.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and one last thing is something to taste. So usually in this area, I would recommend my clients to keep something sweet, sour. Water is also fine. You have coffee, so I would suggest you to take a sip of your coffee.
Yeah,
Yeah. So just checking in. How are you feeling?
better as in there are no other thoughts in my head, right?
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
just like thinking
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah. So, probably one of the reasons why I love this grounding technique is also because one, I know it's a very commonly talked about grounding technique. At the same time, I think it, like you would notice, it helps you engage all of your senses for a few minutes. And let's say, probably like you mentioned, there are no thoughts. There's just focus on, let's say,
I have to practice
getting in
that.
touch with your surroundings and talking about, let's say, what you're noticing and engaging your senses into this particular moment and getting yourself grounded in the present moment.
Mm.
right? So I think this is something that people can give try, and I always say this to my clients as well. It may be something that may not work for you, and that is completely okay, but it is a good exercise to give it a try and see if it is helping you ground yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, I'll definitely give it a try the next time, right?
Yes.
And as we close, right, is there something that you would like to ask, or anything that you would like to mention or discuss?
Not much. I think I currently don't have anything specific to, let's say, talk about or ask. It's just that thank you for, let's say, inviting me, and thank you for, let's say, having this talk with me. I think like it has been a great experience to kind of talk about what I'm doing, or let's say just in general talk about this space. I know that you guys are building something that is, let's say, going to help a lot of professionals, and I hope that the purpose of building this for you, serves the best, results for you as well. And I'm hoping that we're able to see great results from this.
And
Yeah,
would you like to mention how people can reach out to you?
sure.
If they have to follow you on social media, any other digital assets that you would like to
Yeah.
mention?
Okay, sure. So, yes, so my practice is called Guiding Lights Counseling. I have a website called Guiding Lights Counseling, so people can, of course, reach out and check out the website for it and see what services I provide, or what kind of work we are doing in the near future as well. And if you would like to, let's say, reach out for a session, you can book a free consultation call or directly fill in a form for a session, and my team will reach out to you, and probably, we can take this forward accordingly. Secondly, on socials, I'm on Instagram. We are Guiding Lights underscore counseling. There's a Guiding Lights counseling page on LinkedIn as well. So we are trying our best to show up on those pages and probably connect with our audiences there. So if you go and give it a try, see the content that we're building, that would be great. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Renu, for
Thank
taking time
you.
and speaking to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'll just stop the
Yeah.
recording.